Disturbing things that you should never look up on Google. Part 2. Bianca Devins was a 17-year-old from New York known for posting e-girl content to her Instagram. In April 2019, one of her followers, 21-year-old Brandon Clark, DM'd her, sparking a romantic relationship between the two. A few months later, Bianca, Brandon, and another friend of theirs named Alex attended a concert together in the Bronx. Sometime during the concert, Brandon caught Bianca kissing Alex, which led to an argument on the car ride home. Brandon eventually began assaulting her and slicing her neck with a knife that he'd hid under his seat. He then got into Bianca's phone and posted several gruesome images of her corpse to her Instagram story and released a video of the murder as well. He then posted the following picture to her page, hinting that he was going to take his own life. However, police were notified before he could do so, and Brandon was taken into custody and sentenced to life in prison for the murder of Bianca Devins.
I'm literally screaming because in the 1920s, this lady came up with the idea that if she made this giant skeleton with red eyes, that criminals would confess their crimes to it. Like, confess your sins to the crime skeleton.
And this bullshit West Coast dogma has a higher fucking net worth. I bit the apple cause I loved you. And why would you lie? And then I realized you're just as naive as I am. Oh, you're so traumatized, it makes me wanna cry. You dumb bitch, I loved you, I loved you, I loved you, it's true. I wanted to be you and do what you do.
After murdering his grandparents, Kemper bludgeoned his mother to death with a claw hammer while she slept. He then decapitated her and sexually assaulted her severed head before placing it on a shelf and using it as a dartboard. Here's Kemper in a video interview.
I cut off her head, and I humiliated her corpse. It's there, you know? A 6 young woman dead because of the way she raises her son and the way her son is raised, the way he grows up. And what's her closing words? I suppose you want to sit up all night and talk. God, I wish I had.
Ed Kemper is truly one of history's most terrifying serial killers.
Scary Facts That Will Blow Your Mind, Part 1. The middle of nowhere is an actual place within New Mexico. The legend goes that an elderly couple lived out there with their dog and witnessed many strange and bizarre things. One night, they reported seeing a strange creature that they identified as a skinwalker. After reporting this to the police, the family had vanished under strange circumstances. Their dog, however, was left behind. This is the story that Courage the Cowardly Dog was based off of. Like and follow.
This is a man who killed his family twice. Gregory Green is a convicted murderer who completely failed at his second chance at life. In his early 20s, he married Tanya Green. It wasn't long into the marriage that Gregory started to show some signs of abusiveness, such as jealousy, anger, and violence. While Tanya was 6 months pregnant with Gregory's child, she threatened to leave him for good once she got home. But Tanya never got the chance because as soon as she got home, Gregory stabbed her with a steak knife 10 times, killing her and their unborn child. Gregory was given a 15 to 25-year sentence in prison, and during his time there, he was denied parole 4 times. However, during his time in prison, he gained lots of support from friends and family and grew really close to a pastor named Fred Harris, who helped him find God, and he was his biggest supporter of getting him out. In 2008, Gregory was released on parole after serving 16 years in prison, and after just 2 years on parole, he was a completely free man. Shortly after that, he married his second wife, Faith Harris Green, who was the daughter of the pastor he was working with in prison. They were married for 6 years, and Faith had a 19 and 17-year-old child from a previous marriage, and Gregory and Faith had a 5 and 6-year-old child. Over the course of their marriage, Gregory started to show the same signs of abusiveness as he showed before, and Faith also tried to file a restraining order but was denied. Things got really ugly in 2016 when Gregory poisoned his 2 young children that were sleeping upstairs, took Faith to the basement, tied her to a chair, and beat her. He then brought down his stepchildren and shot them in front of her. Faith survived the encounter, and Gregory was sentenced to prison yet again and won't be eligible for parole until he's 97 years old.
This is hands down the creepiest story I've heard yet. Danielle Hawkins was a teacher and she reportedly started to act weird in June of 2012. During summer break, she gathered up a group of her former students and told them to go to the woods with her. She claimed that she chose these students because they needed to rid themselves of demons, and that Saturday night they gathered around a small fire. Danielle informed them that they needed to cut their skin to let out the evil spirits and then burn their skin afterwards to seal the wound so they wouldn't enter back in. One of the students, she held a lighter towards their hand and the wind blew out the flame. For some reason, this freaked her out and she dosed his hand in perfume and then lit it on fire. Another teen was cut in the neck with a broken bottle, and what's even sadder is none of the kids felt it was safe enough to tell their parents. Police did find out through a mutual friend and then charged Danielle.
I saw Nope this weekend, and I couldn't help but think that part of the story might have been inspired by true events. Travis the chimp was an animal actor who appeared in commercials and TV. He was adopted by Sandra Harold at 3 days old and was basically raised as a child. He ate at the dinner table, did chores, wore clothes, and loved baseball. At around age 14, he started showing signs of aggression. On February 16, 2009, Sandra's close friend Charla Nash came over to help get Travis back in the house when he escaped with her car keys. She had known him since he was a baby and was holding his favorite toy, a Tickle Me Elmo, when he went into a rage. He broke almost all of the bones in her face, removed one of her hands, tore off her eyelids, nose, jaw, lips, and most of her scalp. Sandra tried to stab him to stop him, but it didn't work. When police arrived, Travis was shot to death. Charla miraculously survived, but she was left permanently blind and disfigured. This was a scene that really made me notice the similarities. What do you guys
I want you to take a look at this picture snapped from a group of friends back in 2012. Let me explain the haunting backstory behind this picture. It's not for the faint of heart. These friends are thrill seekers, right? So their thing is that they go to explore abandoned buildings all throughout their state in Illinois. But there was one town in particular that really piqued their interest because allegedly it had a madman who was still on the loose. One who police believed was responsible for several bodies that were found in this area, all with their heads missing, assuming that he took them with him. So they come to this town because they're planning to spend the night in this abandoned hospital in this picture so they can record content. But as the night goes on and things get darker, they suddenly get this eerie feeling like they're not alone in this hospital. But while they're exploring in the dark, they start snapping pictures on their phone to try to illuminate the rooms that they're in, and they finally start to explore the showers, which was where they snapped this photo, which was more than enough to scare them into leaving. They didn't know what that was, so they called police, who searched the hospital and realized that's not a mask.
Welcome to the Resident Evil Abandoned Horror Hospital. It has sat abandoned in darkness since 2002 and is filled with blood, biohazards, and equipment. It is rumored to be one of the most haunted places in the world. Exploring is only possible with a torch in the sinister darkness. Would you like to spend the night here?
You're so traumatized, it makes me want to cry. You dumb bitch.
Case I was talking about in this video was surrounding Tori Adamczyk and Brian Draper, also known as the Scream Killers. These two young boys were high school students out of Bannock County, Idaho. One of the culprits in this case, Brian, had some very alarming interests, including the Columbine killers and horror movies. But you see, Tori and Brian were not two popular kids, so they devised a plan to have themselves be known. You see, these two boys had a problem. They were invisible to the rest of the world in their eyes, and they didn't like that one bit. So on the night of September 22nd, 2006, the two would go to their friend Cassie Stoddard's house, where they would do the unthinkable. They would go inside of her house wearing disguises and take this young promising girl's life in cold blood. And the scariest part about this is that they documented leading up to that day, and they also documented right after they did it.
I just killed Cassie. We just left her house. I stabbed her in the throat and I saw her lifeless body just disappear. Dude, I just killed Cassie.
See, this is a ridiculous case with several layers to it, and it still haunts me to this day, and that's why I made this video that I'll show you right now.
Why would you lie? And then I realized you're just as naive as I am.
I can't believe I'm doing this, but this is the story of RTD, and I will not be saying his name. This is his name, and before I get into it, thank you, Robert, for letting me tell your story. But this is the story of one of the creepiest haunted dolls ever. I'm going to be going over it in very brief detail, so if you want all the details, listen to episode 145 of my podcast. In 1904, this little boy, Robert Eugene or Gene Otto, got a present from his grandfather. Gene was really excited because this was a life-size doll and he loved it and he played with it all the time, took it everywhere with him, and was having a really good time with it. This was the doll and he named it Robert. But then Jean's grandparents started noticing some very creepy things happening around their house, including the bedroom door to Jean's room being tilted open in the middle of the night and them hearing two voices having a full-on conversation. They would also hear giggles coming from Jean's room when Jean wasn't home. And one time they heard a very loud crash, and when they went in Jean's room, everything was turned upside down and RTD was just sitting on the edge of the bed. Okay, so all of that happened, and then RTD went to a museum in Florida, and things got weirder. Weird things would happen in the museum, lights would flicker, visitors would slip and fall. But the most creepy thing is that anybody who would disrespect Robert while visiting the museum reported after their visit having experiences like illness, job losses, and other just really bad things. So as you can see back here, there's a whole bunch of letters because people who disrespected him while visiting the museum wrote him letters asking him to forgive them. One of the weirdest experiences was somebody who visited this museum and recorded their whole time walking through the museum, but when they got to RTD, their recording just stopped. And then when they walked away from it, it was working again. And they could not figure out why. There was no camera malfunction, no reason for that to happen. But RTD just wants his respect, he wants his privacy, people bring him candy, things that he enjoys. And I just want to say thank you, Robert, for letting me tell your story, and you are amazing. I can't believe I'm actually telling this story, but here's to spooky season.
On the evening of September 10th, 2002, 31-year-old Miroslav Kuklish was entering an underwater cave off the coast of Croatia, trying to catch up with his 4 dive buddies. He had entered the water about 10 minutes after them because while they were on the surface, the 4 had explained to him that they were going to check out this underwater cave. But Miroslav had told them he wanted nothing to do with this cave, he was just going to go on an open water night dive. So they said okay, and they went without him. Unbeknownst to Miroslav, as soon as the 4 had entered this 2-meter wide hole in the bottom of the ocean, they had immediately recognized it was well beyond their skill level, and they had turned around and gotten right out of there. Unbeknownst to them, though, Miroslav had made the exact opposite decision, and as soon as he got in the water, he went right down to the cave entrance and barreled down after him, and I mean, he really went for it. Now, the way that this cave is set up is there's a 15-meter deep chute, which leads to 2 different passageways, which lead to 2 different underwater caverns, the shallower one, or the upper gallery, and the deeper one, the lower gallery. The bottom of the lower gallery is about 54 meters or 180 feet deep. Okay, so what Miroslav does is he dives down this 15-meter corridor. Now, bear in mind, the walls are super narrow in these corridors, and you're kicking up silt the whole time, so you can't see anything. And where the 3 meet, it's almost impossible to tell which is which, because again, you can't see, and unless you know this cave like the back of your hand, I mean, being underwater is really disorienting. You don't know if you're going to the deep one, the shallow one, or up to the exit. It's kind of just a guess if you don't really know the cave. So he goes immediately down, and he goes immediately into the deep gallery. He makes it all the way down to 165 feet before he realizes he needs to turn around and get out of there. So he makes his ascent back up, and he makes his way back up to where the 3 separate again. And he needs to find the exit. But instead of finding the exit, he goes into the shallow gallery. And now he is running out of air, and he really needs to find the exit. So he goes back up to where they all 3 separate, and he's doing this probably mostly by feel now, because again, with the silt, you can't see. So he has a 50-50 shot. But instead of picking the exit, he picks the way he just came from, and he goes back down into the deep gallery. And at this point, we know when he hits the deep gallery again, he runs out of air. And he finds that shallow air pocket at the top of the deep gallery, but he's only got a few minutes of air in that little pocket, and he knows that. We know he was there for 5 minutes from his dive computer before he ultimately decides that instead of drowning, he's going to take his dive knife and end things his way. So he takes out his dive knife, and he drives it 11 centimeters all the way to the hilt into the left side of his chest. Unfortunately, he would still drown a few minutes after this. We know this from the autopsy report. A police diver would also drown trying to recover his body.
Do you remember the show Wife Swap? They take 2 families who couldn't be more opposite and switch the mothers for 2 weeks. But have you ever heard of the Wife Swap murders? The Stockdale family appeared on the show in 2008. Tim and Kathy Stockdale lived on a rural farm in Ohio with their 4 sons, Calvin, Charles, Jacob, and James. Kathy and Tim were extremely strict with their sons. They were homeschooled and expected to run their family farm. Video games and TV were not allowed. Instead, the boys would earn tokens so they could listen to their favorite radio programs. And those programs had to be pre-approved by Tim or Kathy. The boys were also not allowed to date. Their social life was pretty limited. But they would tour together as a family in a bluegrass band. June 15th of 2017, 911 operators would receive a hang-up call. Police responded to the Stockdale farm where the call had originated from. When they arrived at the farm, they heard a gunshot. When they gained entry into the house, they found the youngest son James and his mother Kathy dead of a gunshot wound. Jacob had a self-inflicted gunshot wound, but he was still alive. After several surgeries and extensive rehabilitation, Jacob recovered. It was obvious that Jacob had pulled the trigger, but no real motive has ever been found. The oldest 2 boys had gotten married and moved out. That left Jacob and James at home with their parents. After Jacob had recovered enough, they indicted him on murder charges. And in April of 2021, Jacob pled guilty to 2 counts of murder. Jacob's father, Tim, asked the judge to go easy on him, but despite this, he was given 2 15-year sentences that were to run consecutively. Jacob will be eligible for parole in 2048. So do you think 30 years is enough time? Let me know in the comments and follow for more true crime.
I have no idea how TikTok isn't talking about this, but there's an active case that is eerily similar to the Casey Anthony case. On October 5th of this year, 20-month-old Quinton Simon was reported missing from his home in Savannah, Georgia. Early on the morning he went missing, his babysitter was texted saying, "Hey, we don't need you to watch Quinton today." But then a few hours later, the babysitter gets a text saying, "Have you seen Quinton?" So obviously the babysitter goes over to help look for Quinton, and she asks the mother, "Have you called the police?" And the mother, Leilani, had not called the police. Shortly after that, a police report was filed and Quinton was declared missing. But it gets crazier. For some background, Quinton and his mother Leilani lived with their family in the grandmother's home. That is, until their family was evicted by the grandmother. The grandmother was also awarded custody of Leilani's children. So Quinton was growing up amidst chaos, and it was apparent he was being neglected. This babysitter had told the grandmother time and time again, "Quinton is being neglected." He would show up in dirty diapers, hungry, with bruises. All signs of child neglect. It kind of seems like this babysitter is the only one who ever really had an eye out for this baby. And that's why it's so crazy that days after Quinton went missing, the grandmother shows up to the babysitter's house screaming at her, asking where Quinton is, implying that she took the baby. But it gets crazier. After Quinton had been missing for about a week, someone on Facebook received a message from Leilani's mother saying, "Quinton is dead. He is in a landfill. My daughter did it, but doesn't remember it." And shortly after this, the police department made a statement saying, "We have reason to believe Quinton is in a landfill and our prime suspect is Leilani, his mother." I forgot to mention, it was trash day when Quinton went missing, and the mother waited to call the police till the trash came. But it gets crazier. All trash going to this landfill was immediately redirected, and on the same day, the search began in the landfill for Leilani's son's body. Her mother, and some friends went to a local restaurant, rang up a $300 tab full of alcohol and food, and they were hooting and hollering and flirting with waiters. That info comes from people who were at the restaurant. So not only is your son missing, but your mother said that you did it and threw him away, and now you guys are out at dinner getting drunk while the police are looking for him? Does anyone remember what Casey Anthony was doing while her daughter was missing? But it continues to get crazier. There are currently protesters parked in front of this house, just like we saw in the Petito case, trying to get justice for this baby because Leilani is still walking free and they haven't found Quinton. The family has parked out front with lawn chairs, and it's seeming that they're getting more confident that Leilani is not going to get charged. On one of the days, the grandmother put a disco ball out front to taunt the protesters. I don't know. And what's nuts is I haven't even mentioned half of the other weird things that are going on with this family. For example, Quinton was named after his uncle, Leilani's brother, who is in prison for murder. I'm going to continue to update on this case, but would you guys be interested in hearing some other stuff that's going on in it? I literally cannot fit it in a 3-minute video.